Hello and welcome to another refactoring. I see the word refactoring on my screen. Random code stream, where I'm going to be doing a bug fix for the refactoring I just wrote. So that's the plan for today, at least to do that and maybe do another thing in rocks. So with that, I'm going to just get right into it as usual. Get some background music going. So if you were watching the stream yesterday, I was playing with the refactoring and seeing what it was like to experience it in Visual Studio, and I ran into a bug, which actually this morning I was able to reproduce in a test. So that's good. That to me, whenever you're working on code and you know that there's an issue with the code, that to have a test that you can repeat so that you can actually have a chance of figuring out what the problem is so helpful, to say the least. So this bug is due to something where the intent was, and actually I've already got this in a branch, because I did this in main, and so then I made a branch and just forwarded the changes over into the branch. Is hey morning Mitch. Good morning, Mitch. Jeez, language is hard this morning. I don't know why. I did have a couple drinks last night, but I'm older and wiser, and I don't get over an edge. But my wife and I went out to dinner last night. I had a glass of wine with dinner, and then we went to our local brew hall, which I really like that place. And I had a couple of beers. She drove home because she doesn't like beer, and that's really all they serve there. So she drove home at that point. So for some reason I'm struggling with language even though I have coffee. Go figure. All right, so anyway, the intent is that you'd be able to write something like this, which is not valid. This is invalid C# code. But just type this, put your cursor here and say make the refactoring, and then you'd be able to move to the end, and then by that point the code has been generated, and you can just type create expressions or create expectations. So I thought, oh, that'd be kind of cool to support. But for some reason, this is throwing a no reference exception. So now that I have a test in place, I can actually make sure that this will work as expected. I should actually change some things up, because I thought doing it with the class was doable, but it seems to throw the same issue in the test. So either way. All right, I think that looks good. So let's just run it again to make sure that we get the test to fail the way we expect it to. God, look at this one. I mean, seriously, this is ridiculous, this window. I complain about it all the time, but I'm like if you try to just highlight things, it zooms by, and I should complain about this more often than I do. Like, actually complain about it to somebody within, because it's unusable to actually navigate around in it. And I should actually just complain to somebody at Visual Studio and say, do you realize just how much of a pain in the ass this thing is? So anyway, that's yesterday's stream, but watch the video. All your refactoring is looking good. Yeah, for the most part, the refactoring is looking good, and as a user of this, I'm looking forward to the next release, because that way I'll be able to create the mock stuff much quicker. There will be a little bit more setup in the project, because I believe you should have a file that just has all that stuff in there, but once you set that up, it will become so easy to do. And it's a standard refactoring, so it should work in Rider as well. So, all right. Standard refactoring, meaning it follows all the compiler API machinery, so it's nothing like special or one-off. So this is failing, if I remember right, in find parent symbol. So let's go into syntax, no extensions. No, not here. Not here. Here. And go into find parent symbol. I am guessing it happens somewhere starting in here. Oh, wait. I had the keyboard in the wrong function setting thing. The window tip yesterday was good. Oh, you mean the tip with the window that I just was complaining about? Yeah, I mean, it took a little bit to figure out, but once I realized you could do Alt-1 and then Tab to when you get to that and then get to this, then that's much easier to be able to move around in this. Although it still feels like it moves a little bit fast, but yeah, it feels a little bit better doing it that way. All right. Close this out and this out. We've got that there, so let's just debug it and see where this is failing. So it thinks it is an identifier name syntax, which actually makes sense. It's not an object creation, even though the identifier name isn't an object creation expression, but that's interesting. It seems like it's a null. Even though I know identifier name, I have tests where that works. In this case, because there's diagnostics, I'm wondering. Wait. What is that? Yeah, it's a... Oh, diagnostics. Okay. It doesn't contain diagnostics, but... Yeah, so the whole tree has diagnostics within it. That might be a thing too that I want to look at is say, when I try to do this, make sure that you're at least the code within the file or the thing that you're invoking it in is valid. But then we go parent. So where do we actually hit this? Oh, I bet here. Yep. Okay. That's what the problem is. And that makes sense because we first try to do the identifier name, and for whatever reason that's coming back as null. So then we expand out to the object creation expression, and this also has errors, so I'm guessing this symbol is not... well, actually is null, and so this all fails with null reference. So now I know where this actually happens. What is the right way to handle this? Is it the right thing to look at the syntax tree and see if it contains diagnostics, and if it does, don't even do the refactoring and just return null right away? Because the caller... I believe the caller of this will check for null, because that's why I marked it as nullable. Yeah, so only if it's not null do we move on. So maybe that's the right thing to do. If self.tree and I could do cancellation token. I mean, I guess I could. And then we just say Annie. Okay. So if you have any diagnostics, and typically I would not do this, but I think in this case, because diagnostics returns an enumerable, If you do an any, that means if you found just even anything in the enumerable, that's better than doing two lists and then count. That's actually, I wonder if that is, I mean, I'm not going to spend time on that right now, but I wonder if that is faster. If you were given a list back or something that had like an array, like a count or a length property, then I would use that. But in this case, you're getting an enumerable. So I just want to say, did I get anything in the enumerable? And if I do, return null. So now in this case, what does this do? Well, it fails. But it fails now because it doesn't make that. Correct. And it shouldn't have. We still have these errors because those are compiler errors. And so we should space that out a little bit better. So we still have to say that that's part of the compilation, and now it passes. Let's go look at all the tests. And they all pass. So that's actually kind of good. It is a little sad that this won't work because I was really hoping it would to do that here. But it just won't pick up that it's an identifier name. Actually, I'm kind of curious. Let's take this back out again. And I just want to see what happens. It is IMockable. Yeah, it's not creatable. Candidate symbols. Does this return a... No, that's not what I'm looking for. Aha. The thing I'm wondering is, could I say, okay, fine, get symbol info symbol is null. Do you have anything for candidate symbols? If you do, then try one of those. Because you can see there's IMockable. Oh, it's just symbol. Yep, it is a name type symbol. There is an enumerable try get not. Yeah, there is. But I think that's also not in .NET Standard 2.0. I can take a look in just a second. But as you can see, I might try to. The thing is, I'm going to have to switch this out of being a pattern because there's been talk of allowing this pattern switch or parent switch, the switch using switch as a pattern to then say pull something out. But the problem is that then you have to have this return something, and you can't have a block here. It has to be. So what people will do is they'll create local methods where they can do the block and then return that. But that's annoying syntax you got to write just to get this to return something. We need a block of code to do that. So they're looking at, would it be possible to have this return like a statement expression? So it's actually returning an expression, but it's a statement, and you can do a block in there. And that's just been a proposal. I don't think it's anything for C# 14, I'm sorry, in the future. Which is fine if I got to turn into a switch or a big F. Yeah, you're right. It's not. Yeah, that's the fun thing about writing all this compiler stuff is that. But I know there's this method here. Yeah, but it's not in .NET Standard 2.0. And over time, this is just going to get worse. I keep saying this. I keep harping on it. But it's true. It's just going to keep getting worse and worse. That there are things that you want to be able to use in .NET, like in a refactoring or in a generator, and you can't because they have to target 2.0. So, oh well. But as you can see, I might try to not do that. Okay, so let's use some refactoring. Can I tell it? No, I don't want a local. Can you? Are you kidding me? Well, that sucks. It won't have a way to reverse it or change it into like the old syntax, the old ways. So that's garbage. And honestly, I'm gonna have to look up because I just don't do this very often. I'm usually actually using a switch expression. So I'm going to switch statement. Yes, switch day. Okay. And they can do cases. So let's actually do that. Let's say I symbol. Actually, let's comment this out right now. Symbol parent symbols equal. I can't. No, there we go. All right, so we could do a switch. We could do an if as well. We could say if parent is identifier and then we could grab this. Our identifier name symbol is equal to that. If it is null, then we say, well, actually, we could do that. Okay, let's get the symbol info first, because I think that always returns something. Yeah, you always get symbol info. So if we say is not null, then parent symbol is equal to that. Else if wait, not reasons, candidate symbols is greater than 0. Then we're just gonna grab the first one. Okay, so that takes care of that case. Now what's sad is all the other cases we could probably, well, class, interface, and record we could. Parameter and object creation we probably want to do as else ifs, and then the other three we could still do as a switch. All right, so if it's that, we always want to target an identifier name first, because that's probably the thing that you're focused on. maybe. And this is also a teachable moment for me, because when I've written refactorings or anything with the compiler API before, I've always been, I've always reminded myself you have to be very, very defensive in terms of what is given to you. You should always do that anyway when you write code, but especially with the compiler API, you can get a whole bunch of junk thrown at you. It's not the compiler's fault. It's just, it's trying to do as much as it can. And so you just have to say, yep, I might be getting something that's wrong. So, all right. So now if it's a parameter syntax, we can say, var parameter symbol is equal to that. If parameter symbol is not null, well, we could say here as this. And if that's not null, then we could say here parent symbol is equal to type. Why are you not showing me? It would be, okay, cool. So again, just a little bit more defensiveness. We won't assume this. Else if parent is this, now what we're going to do is we'll grab that. And what we want to do is I don't know what this would do in the case that I'm trying to figure out, because with the defensive code that I'm putting in here and being a little bit more acute, I might actually be able to escape right out and get the identifier name and do it the way I want it to be done. So this object creation symbol, and we could just say right here symbol as I method symbol, because that's defensive. You know, the symbol will always, I think this is actually a struct, is it? Yep, it is a struct. So it'll always return something. Symbol could be null, so we're being defensive. We're going to be defensive here now. We're going to say if this is not null, then what we could do is say it's the containing type. Object creation symbol containing type. Cool. Now we can have an else, because the other three, I'm just going to grab this and tweak it the way I need it to be. Parent symbol, we don't need to do this. We don't need to do that. Nice. Okay. Now, if putting all this in, what that's going to do here now is actually create one of these. And all my other code should still work. One failed. Which one failed? Expected diagnostic to start on line 5. It was actually on line 7. Oh, because oh yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Because it moved down 2 lines. Actually, let me look at that again. 52261. What did you think it should be? 72281. Okay, yeah, that's what it's gonna do. 72281. Then this should be 77777. Now run it. Still failed. Oh. Wait, what? You know, I'm going to actually just do this. And you tell me which ones are actually incorrect. Pull it up a little bit. No. Where'd you go? There you go. Let's pin it for a second. It should be 5. Why was it 7? I don't know. A little disconcerting that it was what I thought it should be. Okay. Now what do you do? Why is it bouncing around like that? Oh, is it because it's in the... Let's do that. Okay, I think I know what it's complaining about. There's actually maybe 7, 8. Now there's 3. Is this... Oh, okay. Hold on. I think I know why. Expected source diagnostics. I'm wondering if that's what it is. Now, of course, this breaks all my tests because... No, not that. What we want to do is pull that... No, not that one. This one. In there. Unfortunately now, all these that... Give me a moment. Of course, this is just a hunch that the diagnostic is on the fixed source, because the value was off by 2, which meant the line was being put in. Still failed. Yeah, now we're getting all 3 here on the 7 line. Continue. So I think what I need to do is put these in as well. Except make these 7, 7, 7, 7. Now that passes. Finally. And all those pass as well. Of course, I'm going to test this in the scenarios solution in just a moment, but this is good because now I can actually do what I wanted it to do, which is, sure, you didn't finish this, but we got a candidate for that, and we'll put it in there. And if I come back to my code here, let's get rid of this commented crap. If we ran into the scenario that we did before, which is we come out of identifier name syntax with a null for some reason, then what we'll do is we just go to the next parent. And if that became object creation expression, we're going to be more defensive around this now. We're only going to move into this if we actually have not null and if this is not null. And so we should be doing better now, going up to all the parents and finding what are possible values and offering a refactoring that way. The worst. Hold on. I think source generators, analyzers are the only thing keeping NST around. Yeah. Recent guidance for if you need to support .NET Framework, just multi-target instead. There's an NPA review on language standards somewhere last year. Mentioned that until Visual Studio fully runs modern, not front. Doesn't even have span of T. Is that true? That I thought you could say var stuff is equal to new int. Let's just say 3 here. Stuff dot as span. No, you can do span. That's fine. There may not be as many of the newer things that have come in with APIs that support span, with some of the new APIs that are around span to do things with it. That might be true. But I'm getting a span here, and this is the refactoring project, and that is targeting .NET Standard 2.0. So, so that does work. X, and it's a reference span, so we're taking in system memory packet. Maybe that's what in this case is, I don't know, maybe that's what, I'm not doing it on purpose, but it might be a transient from one of these. That's possible because it has to support it, because all of the compiler APIs are also .NET Standard 2.0. They don't move forward. They don't multi-target at all either. So they have to be supporting it. So I'm guessing that's maybe how that's actually being done here. But yeah, the other comments you made are very true. I don't use .NET Standard for anything anymore other than these projects. And if I could get away from that, I would in a heartbeat. Nobody wants to do this, but we have to, because in part Visual Studio targets .NET Framework. That's one of the reasons. The code editor is in WPF. In hindsight, that was probably a really dumb decision to make, but it is what it is. They have done more in recent history where they've done things out of process, and they use interop or inter-process communication between things between the Visual Studio host and that to allow things to be hosted in .NET, but Visual Studio still hosted in .NET Framework. You can't have a process referencing both. So so that's one of the biggest things there. And also because they're just like, well, we don't want to dictate to people what if the compiler targeted a specific version of .NET, then it's saying only this version could target it. Now, of course, you could easily get around that by multi-targeting. You could have your target frameworks say, we target, .NET 4.1 and 4. Of course, now though you have your target frameworks, your TFMs plural, becomes much, much larger because you want to target a whole bunch of these. .NET Standard arguably makes that just simpler because you don't have to think about, which one to target or which ones to target. But it's, oh crap. Did I spill some coffee? Yeah, I did. Hold on 1 second. Wasn't a bad spillage, but a spillage nonetheless. I gotta clean my coffee machine this morning. It's not as fast as it should be. Okay, it wasn't a bad spill, but I wanted to get rid of that anyway. All right. So anyway, where the hell was I? So it works. That's where I'm at. I think we got this fixed now, right? Come back up here. I do that. They all seem to work. Let's go into the scenario solution just so I can kind of confirm that it does actually. And this is a little twitchy. This doesn't always pick up right away, for lack of a better term. Yep, build failed. I know that. Of course, it doesn't pop up the output window. I've noticed recently that the output window doesn't work as well. Hey, King. Someone cooking here. Trying to cook. Okay, so it's only the one rock analyzer. That's good. So now if we come into here, everything lights up. That's good. I can do my refactoring here. That's good. I won't pick it just yet. But let's try to do what I was doing yesterday. And I say REXP is equal to new I mockable. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I suppress values. Well, of course, it's... Yeah, those are the errors that I was... Come on. So now this is all an error, but if I hit the dot here, look, add rock definition. Perfect. That's absolutely perfect. And it's doing it because I've got the property set in the project file, so it's trying to go to the mock definitions file to do that. It's already up here. We can make it. But to bring the point home even further, if I just said public interface iStuff, no, don't help that way, do stuff. And now I would go up here and I'm like, hey, I want to write a test. Var exp is equal to new iStuff. Add the rock definition for me. Now you see it's not doing it because here, well, it's there, so it should pick it up, right? There. So now it's actually created. Huzzah. Methods dot do stuff. And that's all good. Nice. I like that. It's going to be a nice little addition to how many years have you been cooking with C#? Way too many. I started as a quote-unquote professional developer. My first job out of college, out of grad school in 1995. I don't know if you can tell, but my goatee's got a little bit of grays in it. So I've been doing this for like 30 years. Most of my time has been, for good, bad, or indifferent, in the Microsoft world. So started in Visual Basic, did some stuff in Java for a little while in the late 90s because everybody was. And then I also did a little bit with Power Builder. Hated that tool. Absolutely hated it. But, a job's a job. So, excuse me. I started hearing about like next generation, I think there's called like next generation web services. There was like C+++++. That's actually where the C# comes from. It's 4 pluses. It's not because they're using sharp or pound. That's really where it came from. And like Com Plus 2.0, if you remember Com Plus, those days. And of course, Microsoft and Sun had the big lawsuit over Java and Microsoft extending it. And so there was all these rumors of this new stuff coming from Microsoft. And then they finally announced .NET and this new language called C#. And I immediately wanted to get into it. Started looking at writing some books on it. I already written some books on Visual Basic. And really had started doing C# probably I don't know when I first got the first like beta bits. I think somewhere like in 1999 or 2000, and have pretty much over time just that's what I stuck on. So I've been doing it for a while. And it's not because I think it's a perfect language. It's not because I think it doesn't have any flaws. It does. It's not perfect. It sometimes feels like it's inconsistent. But I know it very well, and I can move around in it and get stuff done in it pretty efficiently. So it's kind of what I've landed on. There are other really cool languages out there. I know Rust is one that gets a lot of visibility these days. There's Go, there's Zig, there's Odin. There's one that still hasn't come out yet from the guy who created The Witness, Jai. There's, just a ton of languages out there for varying needs and varying features. But C# is still very, very viable. Was Visual Studio the whole time? Yeah, pretty much. Again, that's just the way it ended up, and I've seen Visual Studio evolve over the years, and sometimes being a very, very big pain in the ass at times. I'd say since 2015, things in the Visual Studio world have gotten better. I'm not saying great, but have gotten better. The fact that it's still Windows only is probably going to be a truism. I don't see that ever becoming cross-platform, but I could be wrong. We'll see about that. But when they started doing the installer, if you know what I mean by that, so you can bring up the installer here, and I can update the preview version. I could have even like 2019, even though I've stopped having older versions around anymore. But they made it so that upgrading to a new version or having different versions of different things on your machine isolated. Now, I'm not saying people haven't had problems with that. I haven't. Ever since like since 2017, I think is when I first started seeing this. It has made this painless for me. And that's a good thing, because it used to not be, upgrading to a new version or anything. Oh my God, that was so painful. It hasn't been for a long, long time. So that's good. So yeah, and as you notice when I'm doing this, like a lot of people will have like the Solution Explorer over on the left. They just take like the default dockings and everything that Visual Studio does out of the box. You'll notice that when I'm coding, I just have the code editor up. And if I want to bring up the editor, or I'm sorry, the Solution Explorer, I know it's Control WS to do that. If I want to bring up the Test Explorer, that's Control ET. I really try to spend a lot of times learning keystrokes and bringing things in as I need them, but then having them go away so I can focus on what I need to do. And I've also, I don't have any toolbars up. You may, again, little things like that, but to get rid of a lot of the noise and just have the code editor up as much as I possibly can. And again, learning all keystrokes is so invaluable. It makes me feel a lot faster than watching people go, oh, so I got to build. So let me go to build. Let me go to build solution. Now I can just hit F6. Easy. I've learned some basics of C++. Moving to C# was your advice to me. That's a very, very general question, because it depends on what you were doing in C#. Advice in terms of learning the language. That's always it's a good question, because it forces me, as somebody who's been doing it for a very long time, to go, if I had to start in 2025, how would I do it? And that's not an easy question to answer, in some ways, because you have this language and .NET as a whole. Because there's .NET, that's the APIs, that's the runtime. You have C#, that's the language, that's the compiler stuff. But you have, in both worlds, decades, literally decades of baggage. And it's been getting better since it all became open source in 2015. So, a lot of the old cruft and the old way of doing things is something that you shouldn't focus on. That said, you also have to keep in mind, and it depends on where you're working and what you're doing, that you may still have people doing things in .NET Framework and using the old version of project files. So if you, I'll answer your other question, then I got to get moving again. If you look at a project file, you can open up like this. This is called the SDK format. And this is what I work in anymore. I don't open up project properties. I don't do any of that anymore. I just edit. If I need to add a NuGet package, I'll just say here, manage NuGet packages, and find it and do it that way. I could arguably just, this one doesn't have any package references, but this one, I could just include it and then have, when I build, it pick up that I need that package in there. So there's a lot of new things that come up that you can use. If you have an old .NET Framework project, it might be using a project format that isn't like this, and you can't edit it, and it's really archaic, and it just sucks. And it's one of the many small but useful things that have been happening in the .NET world over the years to just make things a little bit faster, a little bit better. If I go back into the Rocks project or solution, you'll notice that with console apps like this one, there is no program class. There is no main method. This is using something called top-level statements, which I really like as well. There's also, I think, in .NET 10 coming, the ability to not even need a project file anymore. They're going to basically allow you just to put files in a folder and just say run, and it will just build and run, which is kind of nice. So the other question was WinForm or WPF. Again, it's just kind of dependent upon where your career is going. Arguably, both of them are considered kind of legacy in some ways, because they're Windows only, they're not cross-platform. So unless you're working somewhere where everybody has a Windows machine and there's been a bunch of code written in WinForms or WPF, I wouldn't target. I like XAML, which isn't WPF specific per se, but and there are frameworks like arguably Maui, Avalonia, Uno. They use XAML more or less and use that to build UIs, but they're doing it in modern ways. So I would actually focus on that more than anything. But again, it depends upon where you're working. So the thing too with WPF and WinForms is that they do target now .NET, not just .NET Framework. So that allows you to move those forward and allow you to build against like .NET 9, which is nice. Yeah, and there's other tutorials out there that you can find of varying usefulness. So, you know, on the Microsoft site too, the Learn site, there's decent information on there just to say, okay, this is how you create a project. This is how you create a program class. This is how you start, you know, things up. This is what this is in C#. And just like anything, whether you're learning a new language, you know, a new language in whatever you're using, there's always that ramp up. You have to start somewhere and go, how does all this stuff work? Tools, you know, videos, all these things can definitely help. But I do think it's, even if you've been doing this for a while, there's always this need to kind of, I got to start and go, okay, how do the basics work? How do the core things work? How does the syntax work? How does this feature work? And to really understand it. Yeah, there's no magic formula to saying I can become a C# or a Python or a Rust expert in a week. That just doesn't happen. You know, even if you're using AI tools to generate a ton of code to make it look like you're very productive, do you know what the hell it's actually doing? You know, the phrase "always validate your inputs" will never go away, no matter who is writing it. You always have to validate what's being done. So yeah, you have to be open and saying it's a craft, and things can help you get faster at it, but it still takes time to learn these new things. And yeah, I do try to make navigating in Visual Studio fast. It can actually, sometimes people will go, how did you do this? Or how does this actually work? Because I'm not clicking on menu options to do all that stuff, but I'd rather move fast. All right. I think this bug has been squashed, so that's good. Let me just run all the tests. I don't need to run the code generation tests for this. I'm almost positive. This refactoring is very isolated too. It's in one project with a unit test project against it. So it doesn't interact with any of these other projects or anything. So that's kind of good, the way I've been restructuring this solution to have these projects this way. Not only because I had to from a Roslyn compiler API standpoint, but also because it ends up being nicer, you know, with these things being separated out this way. I kind of like that. It's kind of nice. So once all the tests run, and if they all pass, I'll merge this in and we'll get on to the next thing I want to work on. Oh, and I did find, oh, they're all done. I'll mention this real quick. Excuse me. Yeah, I was looking up coffee cleaning tips to do that. I want to put this in my notes folder because that's always good to do. So let's do that. I come back here. File save. Let's go to docs. No notes. No notes. 14 out of 10, no notes. All right, cool. Because then that's part of what I was thinking about. All right. I think we can... No, I don't want to make a new branch. I don't want to do that. I want to say commit. 372. Fixed refactoring. Time for a merge. And if you're asking yourself, why do you not do like pull requests? Mostly because I'm lazy. For me, I'm just like, I will make a branch and I will do things in a separate branch. But as you're seeing, like what I'm doing right now is I just merge the branch then into main, and then I'll push main up, and then just delete these branches because I don't like branches just hanging around forever. Now, if somebody wants to contribute to Rocks, I absolutely take that, but then what they'll do is they'll fork my repo, they'll make a PR, and then that comes in that way. But I just make sure I have stuff in a different branch. All right, so that is done. Let me come in here. And let's make sure we can close the issue. Close. Good. All right, the next thing I want to work on is, I believe, let me look at milestones. Yeah, I want to do probably this one. But before I get to that, again, I want to make sure I've got stuff off of my brain here. When I added, there's a bunch of NuGet packages called .next. And these are packages that sometimes have things in them that are considered experimental, or maybe things that could possibly make their way into .NET proper. So I forgot about these libraries. I'm like, oh, these would be good to run in my code generation test project and see if it found some bugs. And it did. So there was a lot of things that it found. And of course, I don't know what the issue is with these, but I'll take a look at that later today or tonight or something like that, so I can get a repeatable example and then figure out how to fix this. It has to do something with default interface members, because I can see when I see the word shim, that's something that I create in Rocks to handle calling a default interface member implementation if you haven't done it in the derived type. So something with this type is causing Rocks to get confused. And again, I don't know why, but I will be figuring that out later. What I'm going to work on right now is this rock repository. And I talked about this yesterday a little bit in the stream. By the way, if you are watching for the first time, or you haven't subscribed to the channel just yet, please do so. I would greatly appreciate it. I am trying to hit my first goal of 1,000 subscribers. So any new subscription helps. So if you do that, thank you in advance. So I talked about this yesterday. I used to have this thing called a repository, so you could make that and then create all the mocks off of that. And that repository would be disposable. So in its, let me zoom in a little bit here. In its dispose method, it would go through all of the mock stuff you created and call verify on them for you. So it became a kind of a nice one-stop shop to have that in place. Now, I did have this before in Rocks, but long story short, a lot of changes I made over time, it just didn't work anymore. And so I removed it, but now I've come back and said, I think I should add it because I think it can work this way. I need to probably change how some of the constructors are made public for the expectations. That's one thing I'm going to have to check out first. But if that does work, then this might be a really good idea as well for static abstract members. That's something I really want to try to support in Rocks. It's a arguably not edge case, but a minor case, but you can now have interfaces that have static abstract members that types have to implement. Right now in Rocks, I basically say you can't do that, but I really want to support that. The problem is that doing static things where you have multiple tests running in parallel, how do you make sure that the expectations in one test don't run over the expectations on another test when they have to have this static, sharing, so to speak. They're not isolated to a specific test. So that I think I have a solution for, but that's going to be some work. The point though is that I need something that will say once a test completes to make sure that whatever I stored like an async local gets wiped out, so that something else on that same task or that same thread context won't still see that garbage there. So this might be a good place to have that already in place, so to speak. So the point though is to basically just say you have this repository, this context where you can create the expectations. This is disposable, so you can just have a using here, and then you don't have to remember to call verify. It will do that for you. So with that, let's see if I can get this to work. I did want to do some research to say, if I have in a project something that the type is internal but the constructor is public, and then I have in another project where I say that I have a constraint on the generic type parameter that thing has to be new, can it actually see the constructor that's done in here? I don't know if that's actually going to work or not. We're going to find out. What is something that is in demand in the job market, especially C#? That's a very general question. I don't really have an answer for that. You know, it can range across a whole bunch of verticals, medical, insurance, financial, manufacturing. C# is used in so many different. It's used in games. I think Unity uses it, although it uses a earlier-ish kind of slightly off the beaten path C# version, for lack of a better term, but it is in there. So it really depends on what you're looking for, I guess. All right. We get a branch made. That's always the right thing to do. And actually, I want to change this to, let's call this bring as rock context. And I do want to change some of this because it's no longer, let me define rocks. Because some of these names did change since I put this in here. Save. All right. So we'll get new branch, put that in there. So now we'll come into rocks. And I can kind of just take this verbatim. Yes, any comments? And have cref. Good enough for now. Creates a new creates an instance of the provided expectations type. I'm just gonna leave that there for now. I'll clean that up later. Oh, you son of a gun. Yeah, I forgot. .NET Standard doesn't have this. I mean, I can do it easily. It's not hard, but my God, this is another reason why .NET Standard 2.0 sucks. Okay. How will this work with make expectations? I believe it should. Hold on. I should be able to answer your question rather quickly. It won't, and it shouldn't, because there are no expectations with makes. So if the question that Mitch is asking is a valid one. In rocks, there's basically two ways to make to basically create a mock. The vast majority of times you're using what I call a create, and that's where you can set up expectations. I expect this method to be called with this parameter value, so on and so forth. Then you pass an instance of that into something that's going to actually call it, and then you can verify that things are called the way you expected them to. A make is just kind of like this opaque implementation of an interface. Like you see down here, if I have static virtuals, it just implements it, but it doesn't actually keep track of any expectations. So it doesn't derive from expectations. And probably a better one here is like if you see something with create, this does derive from expectations. The make one way down below here does not. And that's actually fine. That makes sense because it shouldn't. There's nothing to track with a make. So, but good question. I actually appreciate questions like that because it forces me to go, well, wait, what about this? So the more people that think about that for me, the better. Okay, so what's T here? Constraint clauses are unspecified type parameter T. Oh, I must have typed that. I just want to do this. Okay, this is the thing I was complaining about. If this dot is disposed, throw a new object. Dispose exception. Name of rock context. And what are you complaining about here? Yeah, see, this is what's... this is what sucks. Oh, wait a minute. Wait, what? Hold on. No, this isn't in .NET Standard 2.0. The Rocks project is what you reference at runtime. That is actually .NET 9. So, what was this complaining about? Oh, maybe I should actually... There. Maybe I should read the instructions. Jesus. Maybe I should just read what it was telling me to do before I started ranting. Let me pour the last bits of the coffee from the warmer here. This time don't spill. Looking at Neanderthal, although they were probably very, had balanced really well. Anyway, okay, so that works, that works. This all works. That's great. That's wonderful. I can test this out probably very quickly. If I just go into now, actually, I'm just going to shut down and start up again, which you sometimes have to do with, even with improvements in Visual Studio. Sometimes things get cached with referencing projects that are actually analyzer type projects. But I should be able to test this out real quick just from a compilation standpoint of will this work. Go into my integration tests here, pick any one of these. It doesn't matter which one. So Jason, just pick one. Pick one, Jason. Just pick one. Here we go. Yeah, it's showing, see, it's showing that it's errors, but if I build all this, it's going to build. And see, it succeeds. Again, this is just some of these quirky little things that you have to deal with when you're building anything compiler API Roslyn based. Sometimes when you're referencing it here in the integration test project and referencing that stuff as an analyzer output, it still doesn't quite always pick things up the way you want them to, which is kind of annoying. But that's not what I care about right here. What I care about is I want to say using var context is equal to new rock context. Yippee. And now I want to say var e is equal to, let's just grab this, context create. Now why are you erroring? And that's the same error I get here, so it doesn't really matter. What I am curious about is if I say compile again. Yeah, that's interface void must be a non-abstract type with a public parameterless constructor in order to use it as a parameter T. I think what this is saying is because the constructor here is internal, this can't see it. That's what I was a little bit worried about, is that I wouldn't be able to do it. What I could do, just for experimental things, is I am doing well, Guild. Hopefully you are doing well as well. What I could do here, and if people come in and watch this chat, they might just go, what is this guy doing? It's all compiler API stuff in C# and .NET. Specifically, this one, well, this stuff I work on a lot is a mocking library that's similar, if you've ever heard of MLQ or NSubstitute. It's essentially the same idea, except it's using source generators to build everything. So there's a lot of benefits to that. All right, so if I go into Rock's analysis and I go into builders and I go into create and I go into which one is it? I should know my own code, but I don't. I sometimes don't know where things go. What I probably could just do is, that's the mock type builder. That's not what I want. I want the mock builder. Oh, it's the constructor thing. It's the constructor thing. I believe it's the constructor thing. No, that's not where it is. Jason, don't you know where your crap is? You'd be surprised. You'd be very surprised. There, I think this, okay, this is the one. Yes, because here's internal that, and then that's what makes the, if I just said, make this public. Now, of course, that is going to break every single unit test, because the unit tests just look at the generated code output. And so they're all going to fail now, because they're going to be like, well, you said it should be internal here, and now it's public. So I don't want to run those tests. What I want to do is get this to build, go back in the integration test and see, even if this type is internal, can my rock context pick up the constructor now? So let's do this. Clean succeed, shut down, and start up again. How many languages do I know? I guess it depends on how many you know. As I was rambling about before, mostly my time is on C#. I did do a fair amount of JavaScript a while ago, but that kind of faded off because I didn't like JavaScript. I just had to do it out of necessity. But I don't particularly care for languages that are not strongly typed. So things like JavaScript or Python they're not, from a language perspective. I much rather have a language that is strongly typed. I did a little bit of TypeScript as well, but that hasn't happened in a while. Again, most of my time is in C#. It's good to look at what other languages do and spend time in them. What I also think, though, is to really, really get good, and however you define good is your own definition, but to really get good at a language, you need to be spending a significant amount of time in it, pretty much like that is your primary language for a decent amount of time. And I'm being hand wavy here with like timelines there, because it all depends, but I do think you have to be focused on that to really understand how a language works. So most of my stuff is just in C#. But for me, my best language, well, React it's a framework. Like React, Angular, those are frameworks or modules, whereas they use C#. But point is, if I had to pick, I'd pick C#. It's just the one that I feel like I could be the most productive in, and have it, have my stuff being able to be used in multiple operating systems. That's a nice thing too about .NET and C# is, that it is cross-platform and that it is open source. And you'd be amazed. You'd be amazed at this point that people still don't realize that like .NET and C# are open source and cross-platform. Even in 2025, I'm like, how do you not know this? So All right. So I shut down, started up again. Let's bring that back up. And let's see if we get any success now with it being public. Down here is where we did it. Just make sure we build and then everything shows up. And unfortunately, because it's in this state where, yes, it all succeeds, but it doesn't actually show the type as being correct. I can't actually get the files to show up. Oh no, there are here. Yeah, see, it says it's not generating files, but you are. So it's not a perfect world, but at least let's see if we can get this to compile now. Now it compiles. That's actually good. So if I go F12 now, and now I can F12 into it, the type is still internal, and I do this on purpose because these types are just specific to your test project, typically. What I might do in the future is allow people to say all the stuff that Rox creates, I want it to be public because I want this now in the project or library that I'm creating. I want them to be exposed to other test projects I'm doing, something like that. Maybe. But now if I come down here where that stuff where is that? Way down here. There we go. And now you see it's public. And so now this actually picks up on it. And if I comment that out and I put this in here and then I comment out verify, does this test work? Hot damn and hallelujah. That's actually nice. That's very nice. I like that. Now, I'm not... Okay, so let's back all that out because we want to leave it the way it is right now, for now. But, and like I said, what's going to happen too is if I go into my test projects, let's just run all them. You're going to see, because I've now changed the thing from being internal to public, a whole bunch of tests are going to fail. It's just that I have to go into the code now and say where it was internal, change that one line to say public, and then all the tests will pass and it'll be fine. So I also react, you know how it is, right? Could you see that and get? I'm not sure what demo you're talking about. Oh, that's I meant this project. I'm still getting used to because I had to rename a whole bunch of things where things actually exist now. So for so many years, Rox Test had those tests in there. They're now an analysis test. So I'm guessing it'll be like anywhere from 150 to 200 failures. But again, it's not a big deal. That's expected. It's just that I'll do that off camera because I don't need to people watching me change test code to have one word change. That's probably really boring. This is link. I'm not seeing a link in the chat. So that's good. If I go back here, I go to context. I've already kind of tested it. Well, I haven't added tests to it, so I really should do that. But this went much better than I thought it would. I was kind of happy with that. A new type instance that will have context is disposed. Nice. Get rid of that there. Verifies all tracked expectations. Good enough for me. Nice. Why rock context instead of making all create yeah, so that's a oh, okay, never mind. But I'm going to answer your question anyway, because it is a good one. It actually is something I've explored for, and so other people kind of, if they want to get where my head was with this, is consider making expectations to be disposable. I have an issue here. This is actually going to be closed now because I tried this, and the problem is, yeah, there's a whole bunch of notes I have on here, is I forgot. I think I tried to do this once and it became kind of a pain in terms of having a using for each expectation. I already feel a little dirty, just a slight bit, about using disposables for something that is scoped. And what do I mean by that? Is this is going to be a long, not rant, 224. Is that what that is? Yeah, 224. You're right. That is the number. Disposables were added. There used to be this training company called Developmentor way back in the day. And they had a list server up, and they created ones for .NET just so that people who were starting to get interested in .NET when it was in beta to talk about issues. And one thing that came up that was a big issue is this thing about like letting go of unmanaged resources and to do it in a proper way. And how do you do that within the language and the runtime? And long story short is they came up with disposable. And so it's just an interface that has dispose or dispose async now. That's another thing that exists. But the using statement in C# will put a try finally in place to basically say in the finally block, it will call dispose for you. If you didn't have that in the language, you just have to remember to call dispose all the time whenever the object would go out of scope. So that's where this all landed, and that's where this all ended up becoming. And in retrospect, what I think they should have done is really have the notion of something that's scopable. There's languages that have the notion of defer. So you can say, I want to defer a function call. And what that means is that function won't be called, or that thing won't be done until you fall out of scope. And so the language will put in the necessary machinery to say, if you want to defer something, whatever scope you're in, when you're about to leave that scope, it will call that method for you. That's arguably what C# really should have done in retrospect. Maybe not have a defer keyword, but an iscopable, and not have it tied so hard to unmanaged resources, But this is the world we live in, and people do this a lot. Well, they'll use disposable to say, when I go out of a scope, assuming people are putting a using statement in place, then I will do whatever cleanup I want to do. And in this case, I'll call verify. So that works. And I feel like this is a much cleaner solution than having each expectations now implement disposable. Having this as a one-stop shop, I think, is much cleaner and can also potentially be a good place to do the static abstract member stuff that I need to do. So I'm kind of happy with this. I'm kind of happy where this landed. I would need to write a test just for this, though, because that's the right thing to do. So we should have like a rock context tests, right? And then we'll have public static class test, public static void create. And so what I could do here is say using var context is equal to new rock context. And I could have a type in here, internal sealed my expectations class. which derives from expectations. And you're going to say, what do you need to implement? I need to implement verify. And what I'm going to do is nothing. I'm just going to say, yep, we're good. But I implement that. I just had a thought. Wouldn't it be funny if I used rocks to implement a mock of expectations? That would be kind of funny, but probably not very smart either. What I should do is make sure that I've actually... So let's do that. Public bool has been verified. Get private set. And so in here, what we'll do is this dot has been verified is true. Okay. And so we'll say var expectations is equal to context create my expectations, except what we're going to have to do here is actually put this into a block that we have control over. This is going to get a little bit okay. And then we can assert that expectations bang dot has been verified is true. And that works. Cool. That's and then there's another test I could write, which is basically say create with no expectations created. Actually, let's change this to use. And so in this case, whoops. Let's do this. Let's say assert throws, does not throw. And so we'll do, nope, not that. There, and then we'll do that, and then we'll do expression bodied. And the reason I'm doing this test is because I just want to test in there. It says if I didn't actually make any expectations, then the dispose here should work just fine. There shouldn't be a problem. And then I could have some tests. I'm going to do that off camera though. I'm going to have some tests to say use like try to do a create when you've already disposed the object, just to handle the case of that actually happening. I think this is fine to use disposable way for structs. So use the duct type a disposable, just having disposable. Yeah, you're right. There actually are a couple of places in .NET. That case that Mitch mentioned is true. And I think with tasks as well, if you look like a task, you can create your own task type as well if you want to. So there's like very limited compiler generated places where you can actually do what's called duct typing, or what's also sometimes called structure typing, which is if I match the structure of what's expected, then I can call something safely on it. I don't actually have to derive from that type, which was what's called nominal typing. So yeah, that is true. I just disposing and the whole design around it originally was let's tackle the problem of making sure we have a way to clean up unmanaged resources effectively, more or less. I think it could have been just a little bit wider to say, let's have a way to say, I want to call something at the end of a scope. And if that just so happens to be unmanaged resources, so be it. You know, to have a little bit of a wider view on what was actually happening here. But it's just a minor rant. It's not something that I have a huge issue with. It's one of those things of in context that should have been something considered. But again, they were, time pressures, constraints, trying to get something new out the door. That's what they landed on. I think this is saying I can just do this, and it's the same thing, and they are correct. And then I can get rid of the curlies and that, and I can't. No, I do have to do that. Okay, that's fine. That's fine. And I should be able to run these tests, and they pass. Okay, so what I'll do is I'm going to clean up all my unit tests. I'm going to clean up or add a couple more tests here for the dispose conditions. And then I'm going to consider changing all the integration tests to using this context instead of calling verify directly. And I'll also put more weight around using this and seeing how does this actually work. I think that's probably a eating your own dog food type of moment. So I think I'll do that as well. But I'm happy where this has landed. I'm quite happy with the result. So I think this will be a nice addition for rocks, along with the refactoring as well, and make things just a little bit easier, a little bit more consistent, expected. All those words. So that will be. I'll work on that just again off camera. The next time I do a random code stream, I'm guessing what I will do is if I look at issues and I look at milestones for 9.1, because I really want to get this out of the door by May, if not sooner, like by the end of May, is this one should be done today. This one I will also do off camera because that's easy. And then it's just these two in determining how do I want to, do that, and do I really need that for a 9.1.0 release? We'll see. But either way, I'm going to end the stream here. I want to thank everybody who's been watching the stream. And again, if you have not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate it as I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers. Any new subscription helps. So thank you in advance for doing that. I will be streaming this afternoon because I also do streams with other things, not just coding. I'm actually playing Hollow Knight right now, so I'm going to do I'm definitely doing a stream this afternoon. For me, that's Central Time in the United States. But I'll be streaming that for a couple hours this afternoon, and then maybe after dinner for a little bit. But, The Last of Us, again, new episode. Got to watch that. So I'll be doing that tonight. But doing probably a couple more Hollow Knight streams this afternoon. So if you want to check that out, please do so as well, and I'll hope to see you with that. But for now, I am done with... Oh, wait. One more question here real quick. Artist C# 13 and limits on try finally and async. Do you need to do anything to handle that? There are limits on try finally and async. I'm not sure I understand the question, Mitch. If you want to, post that in the Rocks Discord. There is a Discord server for Rocks. So if you want to post more there, because I want to stop the stream here, but I think you're referring to try finally did have, you couldn't await async calls in the finally block. I think that might be what you're talking about. I'm not sure. There is now an iasync disposable interface as well. And you can do, if you need to do async calls within dispose, you'd use that route. But in any event, post more details in the Discord server if you'd like. And with that, I'm going to stop the stream. Thank you all for watching. Take care, and I hope to see you in the future.